Council, who is the Director of Public Health there. And we've got Mark Smith from Gateshead Council. Where is Mark? Ah, hello. And Becky Elton from Changing Lives. Yes, hooray. So each of these guys is going to tell us a bit about what they're doing. And they may not have got there yet, but they are certainly trying. And then you will have an opportunity to kind of have a quick break and think about what resonates most for you and what questions you might want to ask, and then you'll have an opportunity after that break to ask some questions. So I think...
Hiya there, this is Tom. Yeah, one of the things I picked up on around our table was the fact that one of the things you thought was a little bit weak was your consultation with the public around your changes. Have you thought of co-commissioning your local health watchers who already work with health and social care with all your members of the public, but obviously now it's just a local authority? Just a thought.
Yeah, and I think, is this on? Can you hear me? Oh yeah. So yeah, we do have health watch as part of our kind of our system group, so we do work closely with them. I think we really kind of grappled with this issue of engagement is where we started, but what we did a very detailed session on it actually, and talked more about how we genuinely co-produce with citizens, and I do think it's still one of our kind of blocking points, even working with Health Watch. We've not quite worked out the way that we follow our feet on that and really do it as part of normal business rather than seeing it as a nice add-on to do. And I think we genuinely need to think of different ways of doing that, and whether that's about having citizens as part of the alliances that are actually coming together and making decisions. We think that's one of the key options, except we want to make sure that actually then what you're not doing is getting the usual suspects as well. We need to be able to actually engage with citizens, people, members of the public in where they are, and actually have that conversation around what matters to them. We actually took it upon ourselves as the Alliance leadership team to go out and have those conversations with people from anywhere in South Tyneside. The remit was just go out there, have a conversation with somebody about what matters to them, and we have played with those methodologies, but we've not turned it into any kind of systematic way of really drawing it into how we work on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. Oh, there's one. I can't see. There's someone behind a pillar would like to ask a question. Do you want to just say who you are and then ask the question?
I'm Angela Oxbury from Women's Health in South Tyneside, and I would like to ask Lynn, because I work with a voluntary organisation, a charitable organisation, and I'm interested to know what governance and legal structure your organisation operates under, and whether that changed in the amazing process you've gone through in changing the organisation.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we are constituted as a charity. We did go through a very big governance review at one point. I think when we were at the beginning of our changes, our board, because we were just kind of like a regional charity, and our board reflected that. You know, there were people on the board that were friends of so-and-so from the parish next door, you know, that kind of thing. And I think at that time, because we were doing something quite big and quite different, that was good for us for a while, because we got lots of nods, and I'm sure you were doing something lovely, so we probably got away with all sorts of things. But actually, I think when it got down to it and we started to really embed this, we had a very big governance review, and we brought on board a very different type of trustee onto our board. I think we had 9 new members come on board at the same time, and really around kind of buying into that vision, looking at, you know, getting people in from like big society capitals. We're looking at social investment. We've got an ex-director general of the Treasury, you know, all this kind of stuff, because actually we wanted to have a board that was very robust and very grounded, because I think when you're doing this type of work, you do run the risk of it looking sometimes, not, I don't want to say reckless, but, you know, it's kind of, you're doing something that's so different. You almost need to kind of have that real sounding board and that robustness, but with people that really buy into that vision as well. So I think we've been quite lucky with the board that we've got now, but we didn't actually change the governance structure of it. It was more just who was around the table, I think, was the big change for us.
I've actually got a question here and then a question over there.
Okay, thanks. I'm Andy Crosby from Your Voice Counts. this is slightly complicated, so just give me a second to work this through. We've been talking heard a lot from the speakers today about being person-led and the importance of co-production. We just had that question about that. And the need to be brave. And pass power back to the people. That was one of your phrases, Lynn. I'm framing this as a question to the panel. It's really a question to everybody here. But looking around the room, in the room we have directors, we have CEOs, we have managers. We don't have frontline staff. We don't have the people that we're talking about. So my question is, do we need to do this differently?
Oh.
Yeah.
You've got the
You've got
microphone.
We've got a very interesting take on how we involve people we work with. Our intervention itself kind of co-produces at the point of that intervention. So we don't have focus groups. We don't bring people together to ask them what they think about something. It really is about meeting that person where they are at that point and giving them what they need. There's something around when we're looking at what the impact of that has on some people at some point, when we look at really changing that system and that dynamic. And Tom mentioned this about, sometimes you get the usual suspects, but I think what we found sometimes is there's something around that homeless identity and that homeless persona that you can kind of create that with people if they're getting their status through being a vocal point or an advocate of their situation. So we try very much to keep our kind of the co-production bit, if you like, or what's happening at that point of intervention with the coaches. So it's something we're grappling with. We don't have the answer to that, but that's something we're really sensitive to at the moment.
Yeah, I think what we have to do as organisations, because we can't do this with every frontline staff member. I think what we have to do is have leadership in this, and I think hopefully that is what we've got in the room today. And then I think as organisations we have to really challenge ourselves on how we involve both the people that we're working with and our staff in different ways and using different methods as well in that co-production. Because I think everything kind of sort of nets upwards. I'm sure Toby's got better academic language for this, but it all sort of sits within each other in itself. So you've got a particular service where, again, we would be looking to co-produce at the point of that interaction between the person we're working with and the person doing the support. But then we'd also be looking at, well, actually, how does that then influence the service in its day-to-day running? And then if we're developing new things, how are we making sure that people are coming in and we're doing some genuine co-production? So I think there's probably a whole load of organisational changes probably most of us need to make in order to involve people and so that it gets to a place where it is that genuine co-production and sharing of power. And I think that will take time, and I think it will take challenge for each of us in our own organisations as well as in the wider system.
I suppose our reflection is that every system is perfectly designed in many ways to get the results that it gets, and actually we really acknowledge that we're not seeing the dissemination necessarily of the principles, the ways of working and behaviours that we would like to see, but we also acknowledge that the behaviours we see and the results we see at the moment are as a result of the system being the way that it is, and we need to change that, and that will take time. One of the things we often reflect on is that we've trained people in many ways, and we've created those systems, as I mentioned, to behave in a particular way, and we now need to unlearn that and create a new way, and that's not easy. It really is one of those questions. I'd love for more answers to come out of this room about how we get spread and how you get spread rapidly in a way that makes sure that those principles really are disseminated across all parts of the system and not just being kind of flourishing in one small area, I guess.
Short answer, yes. I think a frontline version of this would be fantastic. What we're doing in the moment is every day or every other day we debrief, so we just take people out of the casework and say, how are you? How are you finding it? Who's beating you up? Who's being useful? What can I do to help you? And then critically, what are you learning? So there's learning. So we have hot debriefs on particular topics. We have regular ones. And then there's reflection, which we're not doing, because the guys that I'm working with are the ones going first. It's certainly in the context of work I'm doing. There are many other frontline innovators out there right now doing stuff under the radar. What I would love is for this to evolve into that. We're trying it with our little, precious little fragile prototype. And what I'm finding is that when you attend to those questions with the frontline staff, it helps them realise they're not going slowly insane. And that's so important, because you used the word that accusations of potential recklessness, because what you do is quite off the cuff. The reassurances I'm having to give people that actually helping that lady paint her house because it's miserable, and it's massively important to help her feel better and to start to build onto other things. You're not doing something wrong. And that requires sometimes a bit of PR work. And it needs a lot of people. You're lots of nods here. If the girl I'm talking about saw your nods, she'd feel 100 times better. So I think we need to try to build a version of this in, either with or another incarnation of it, with the guys doing the work on the front line. That would be fantastic.
Okay. I mean, I think I would just add to that there's often a lot of talk about how we get the user voice in there, and we've talked about the challenges of that and the authenticity challenge. But I do think, in terms of the tiers and levels of workers within our own organisations, is as important, and listening to them, and that actually we need to find ways of doing that more effectively, because we need to change cultures throughout, not just at the top level. Yes, sorry, there's a question over here, and then Carol had a question. Is that right? Or is your moment gone?
My moment is gone.
Okay.
We've got 2 more after this.
All right, okay.
Hi, my name is Marcus Janal. I'm a consultant. I accompany organizations in figuring out how to navigate complexity. And I'm actually not sure if my moment is gone as well. I'm giving it a try, because it's very similar to what was just discussed now. My original question was, when I was listening to the story about Mayday Trust, was, wow, this is amazing. This organization essentially reinvented itself from scratch. How many of us can do that? Especially if you're in the public service, it's very hard. You cannot really reinvent everything. But then I also think it's such a nice spread between the 4 panelists and their presentations, and how far they reinvent their...
This is because we planned it well.
Yeah. Obviously. But then it also comes to leadership, I guess. The point made about leadership in this transformation means to create a space as big as or small as possible for this new paradigm to grab a hold and emerge. And to be very honest, I'm not exactly sure where I'm going and if this is leading to a question. But the other thought I had...
Yes, I think we need a question.
Okay, so I just want to make another point about...
That isn't a question.
Let's reflect a bit on that. Who can reinvent themselves as an organization? Should we actually, all of us now, go home and say, okay, let's scrap everything and start anew? What are the principles we should follow? Would you support such a statement, or would you say, well, it depends?
If I didn't think we could, I wouldn't have this job. We have to think we can. My principle is design for perfect and get as close to it as you can. And perfect as defined by the people who are here to help. Of course we can. Organisations aren't hewn out of the rock, they're arbitrary. Therefore we can change them. Now, I know there are legislative barriers to that, and there are cultural institutional barriers to that, but so what? If it works, it will get traction, and if it gets traction, it ultimately becomes unstoppable, and groups like this are where it begins. If we don't believe that, even if in some days it feels like it's totally impossible, and if it doesn't ever, if you go through it never feeling like that, you're doing it wrong. It's got to hurt, and it's got to be seemingly intractable at times. But yeah, I think I work for a local authority. I mean, you don't get more kind of... I don't need to finish that sentence, do I? But that's the point. If we don't feel this is possible, why are we bothering?
Can I just add, I think, it all sounds lovely when you say it all in one speech. you know, a lot of this is kind of very iterative. You learn as you go with something. It's not just like there's not a big package for it. And I think, you know, Mayday Trust, when we started on this change, really this was brought about by austerity. I mean, our new CEO was brought in to look at mergers and acquisitions. And it was kind of like, well, actually, is there anything we can do differently? And that's when we started to listen to the people and say, look, that's too big, you know, and having a board that will support you around that message of not to survive for survival's sake. Why are we here? You know, really not trying to have that mission drift and just really sticking to that vision. I mean, we were in a different circumstance. We did have some reserves that allowed us to just leave commissioning areas. We've invested money into it, and I know that's not possible for all organisations. So, you know, we did have some kind of like unique factors as to how we were able to do some of this stuff. But I think it's just keeping that momentum and keeping that vision and making some really hard decisions and sometimes just seeing what happens. And, you know, really holding it for a few months and just seeing does it play out or not, and having that we've heard the word before, but that kind of that permission, that environment where there is no blame, it is about learning, and it's kind of just doing what you can for the people you work with, and not deviating just to survive for ego.
And we're not used to that way of working, so it takes a bit of getting used to.
Yeah.
Any other contributions, or shall we move on to the next question?
It was just very quickly to say that I think within public sector, I don't think we're far off having to reinvent ourselves, given the
It's a catalyst. Austerity
the
is a
slow
catalyst.
erosion is, and the way that we've been dealing with that slow erosion is simply not going to be possible for much longer.
Yeah. Just to add as well, I don't think it's necessarily about like razing everything to the ground and then building it again. I think it is about evolving your services and changing things where you can, and, you know, learning from other people. You know, our partnership work with Mayday has helped us massively in just thinking about our strengths-based approach, and that's come about because of their generosity and our willingness to kind of be involved and to learn. And I think if we can kind of engender that sort of spirit, then it helps everybody to start to sort of transform within it.
That feels like a positive place to leave that question. Over there.
I should have said this to start. Quick rule I heard the other day for questioning in this environment: your first statement should be a question. There shouldn't be a second statement.
I'm going to break the rules then. I'm David Smith from Oasis Squirrel Housing. The question's from Mark, and it was about your example of the family that had no food in the cupboards, and you went, it was person-led, not service-led, and you built from there. And I just thought, as an organisation working in the voluntary community sector, I just thought, that's us. That's what we do. And I'm sure that I've seen nodding heads, I'm sure that there's other organisations in the room that we thought, and it's not rocket science, is it? But it could be quite profound. And I guess my question is just, are you saying you want the public sector to operate more like the voluntary community sector?
No. First, I'm much more interested in method and structure. So we did it because it was the thing that the team took a view that we need to do this right now in the moment. What we're taking from that was the right thing to do. What we're not taking from that is local authorities are the right people to do it. It's just that we did it there and then. This is a prototype that's more focused on efficacy rather than efficiency or sustainability. I only bothered about the top line of that last diagram. One of the things we have to do when we debrief is to say, okay, we did that and it was helpful. What would be perfect? Actually, it would be perfect if the ecosystem of public, not-for-profit, etc., was such that we could just make that happen as instantly as we were able to in this artificial environment. So it's really about saying, we did it there and then, the method appeared to work because it helped us to go around that understand and rebalance loop. But by just attending to the urgent, we then got onto the important. But actually, whether it's something we ultimately do or not, I think is a question much further down the line. So I wouldn't necessarily take from what we did that's what ultimately we should do. It's just what they did in that moment.
Okay, thank you. Another question over there.
Hi, this is going to break the rules as well, so sorry this isn't so much a question, but it was more in relation to the point the gentleman made on table 6 about involving the front line. My name is Peter Smith, and I've just moved over to the Ministry for Homelessness and Housing and whatever we're now called, but I was with Homelessness previously, and I guess what I wanted to make the point was that in terms of frontline networks,
We do have a very vibrant one here in the North East that's worked very closely with organisations like Changing Lives with support from Vaughan, and we've learned and are still evolving with that. So, you know, there's Be the Change in the North East, which specifically, yes, has had a focus on homelessness, but it's, as we've already touched on, it's much broader than that. And we've seen real benefits in terms of what organisations like Oasis has got great services developed in Gateshead as a result of things that came out of ideas that were brought from the front line. And I guess it's just a point of saying that these things are happening within different areas up and down the country, and the front line do have a very clear role to play within it, I think is the point that was made. But what I would say is probably a little bit of a plug in terms of Be the Change in the North East, that if you haven't got staff who attend this network or you want to know more about it, I certainly would recommend people find out more about that, because all of the organisations and the way that it links to commissioning and the ideas that come out of it can really inform some of what people are obviously trying to achieve, I think.
Okay, go on the Vaughan website and find Be the Change Network. I mean, their focus is very much people working in the multiple and complex needs environment, so I just need to clarify that. Was there another question? We were quite nicely going around the tables there. Anything from the back? Are you... Oh, right.
Hi there, I'm Alison O'Connell from the Big Lottery Fund. I noticed a number of the panel were talking about the importance of the relationship with the Commissioner and kind of developing this joint understanding. So it was really interesting. And I wanted to ask if any of you had an example of kind of how you had sort of documented and shared improvement and learning with the Commissioner, or if not, what you would like that to look like.
Yeah, we've got, is this working? Yeah. An example with our commissioners in Westminster, because we were brought in really to shake things up a little. We've been referred to before as a bit called a coach bomb. It kind of goes off and this kind of stuff all happens and everyone's like, oh God, what do we do? And with that relationship with our commissioner there was a form being introduced into the council. It was called a chat form, and it was around capturing the health and well-being of everybody in all of the services. So everybody had a very clear idea as to the situation of everybody, and we could share that information. And it was like a tombstone, and I don't think anybody in this room would want to answer any of the questions that were in it. And so we challenged the Commissioner on that and said, look, you know, this doesn't fit with the PTS, it's not why you brought us in here, so, you know, we really don't want to do that, it's not part of what we do. And actually they invited us to present to the whole of the commissioning team and some of the providers about why that wouldn't work. And then they scrapped the whole form, so the form now doesn't exist in the borough. And just that, you know, I'm not sure if I've answered your question exactly, but it was around kind of that relationship to be able to challenge and be challenged, and to open something up and not just take it as an enforcement, but to say, actually, I'm going to open that up and let's listen and let's see if that, you know, do we need this stuff? And actually, a lot of the time you don't. But it's having a kind of a commissioning body that's willing to kind of take that on and say, actually, let's just shove it in the bin.
Okay. Any other burning example?
I think there's probably two things. One of them is about taking the Commissioner on the journey. I'd say with you. It's not. It's like, you know, it's a co-produced journey. So, you know, actually, what we would want is, rather than a sort of necessarily like writing a report that we then hand over to that person in power and say, look how well we did. I think it would be more about, you know, come along with us, see what we're doing, be involved in those changes and that learning. But also, I think probably our Fulfilling Lives Newcastle and Gateshead programme is a good example of where, you know, we have been capturing learning all the way along. Obviously, it's Big Lottery funded. And, you know, we made quite a radical change last year because we said, you know what, this isn't working. And that worked well, I think, documenting that and working with Big Lottery to make sure that, you know, you guys were happy with how it went. So now I think, you know, we've got quite a shift in that programme, which has been fully supported all the way along. That it wasn't difficult to do that. So I think that's the thing. It's like, you know, if we identify that something isn't working, then what we would want is, you know, we could provide that evidence and then that open dialogue so that we can actually have a conversation about how we can make a difference.
Any other quick contribution from the panel, because I need to wrap this up?
I suppose we've had got an interesting example at the moment whereby we've been doing some prototyping with a third sector organisation, and we're now grappling with how we scale in a way that fits with procurement rules, or what we're being told are the procurement rules. That's been a real challenge for us. I suppose that's one of the perhaps the challenges we all need to look at and understand how we address, but it could be a rate limiting factor for starting prototype work and being able to scale it when actually you've got a relationship going rather than a traditional commissioner-provider split.
Okay. Do you want to make a final parting comment? No? Okay, that's fine. I am going to draw it to a close there, if that's okay. Sorry. Because I'm trying to get back on track with time. I'd like us all to just give a big